Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, literature, and in popular culture. Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome to another show. My name is Bruce Markison. As always, I'm joined by co-host and producer Tracy Asteria. Tracy, what's going on with you this week?
Oh, not a great deal. Definitely feeling a lot better than last week. I came down with a cold, but all is well now, and I'm really excited to get into the show today. How's everything been going with you?
Good. So you're up for a full hour of talking.
Yes.
We're going to do a couple of movies tonight. No guests, so we're going to have to dominate the microphone, or the two of us. You're up for it?
Absolutely. It's going to be
Yes.
fun. Yes.
All right. Very good. Very good. Well, on this week's episode, Tracy, as you know, we're going to be discussing two horror films, both pretty good, I think. One of them is great, in my opinion. We'll get your thoughts as well. But there are also two horror films that are connected to each other. One of them celebrates an anniversary. One of the movies came out 45 years ago this month. It was in May of 1980. And that movie is The Shining, based on the Stephen King book. The other is a more recent film that continues the story of The Shining, and that would be the 2019 release Dr. Sleep, which is also based on a King novel. So we're going to begin with the film celebrating the anniversary from 1980, The Shining. And this is a franchise, Tracy, that actually started with King's 1977 novel, also titled The Shining. And that book became both a financial and artistic success for King. He was already coming off two other successful horror novels. One of them was Carrie, the other was Salem's Lot. But The Shining would kind of take him to another level. And it would become King's first best-selling hardcover book, while also drawing very strong critical praise. And it would spawn a couple of movies, a 1997 television miniseries, and then a second book published in 2013. King's 1977 book, which some regard as the author's finest written work, and that's saying a lot given the volume of good stuff that Stephen King has produced over the decades. Well, that 77 book is based on his own experiences while visiting the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. Here is the storyline to the movie, which came out in 1980. Of course, the great Jack Nicholson, probably one of the best actors of the last 60 years, stars as Jack Torrance, a former school teacher who has decided to leave that job to become a full-time author. Though he initially seems to be a pretty pleasant, reasoned man, very polite during his job interview, he is also a recovering alcoholic. And as we learn later in the film, once injured his son in a drunken rage. But he has now apparently stopped drinking for the last 5 months. So he does the interview for the job and takes the job as the wintertime caretaker at a remote Colorado hotel called The Overlook. Staying there with his wife, Wendy, who's played by Shelley Duvall, and also his son, Danny, Jack hopes to find some inspiration and solitude in writing a new book. Now, it's interesting, toward the end of the interview, he is warned by the hotel's general manager that a previous wintertime caretaker, a man named Charles Grady, had actually lost his mind in 1970, killed his wife and 2 children, and then took his own life. While this is, I guess, a little bit jarring to Jack, he seems to handle the news of this okay, and he expresses full confidence that this is not going to happen to him. He says that isolation and quiet is exactly what he needs. So Jack impresses the general manager during the interview. He takes the job. Not long after settling into the job, Jack begins having some strange visions. He also faces a relapse of drinking as he meets a ghostly bartender named Lloyd in the hotel's main dining room. This happens even though the hotel is completely empty for the winter. Also, Jack's personality begins to turn rather dark. One day, when Wendy approaches him while he is writing, he becomes really nasty with her and tells her to go away and to never again interrupt him while he is writing. And that's kind of a turning point for him in this film. Now, Jack and Wendy's son, Danny, is also having strange visions, including the appearance of two young twin girls in one of the hotel's seemingly endless hallways. All the while, it's also revealed that Danny has an imaginary friend that he says lives in his mouth, and he calls the friend Tony. At times, Danny speaks in Tony's voice, often with very foreboding warnings about the future. Very disturbing. On his first day at the hotel, Danny actually meets the head chef, a friendly man named Mr. Halloran, who recognizes that Danny has special powers, specifically the ability to shine. And that means the ability to communicate with others and read their minds without speaking a single word. Halloran also has this same ability to shine, and that creates a special connection between him and the boy. Later on, after Halloran has gone home to Florida for the winter, he starts receiving a mental communication from Danny, who indicates that there is trouble at the Overlook and that he needs help. Well, much to his credit, Mr. Halloran begins to make his way back to Colorado. It's a long trip made all the more difficult by a huge snowstorm that has engulfed the area surrounding the hotel. All of this, as we'll see, will contribute to madness and murder within the walls of the Overlook, and eventually a rage-filled pursuit through the hotel's famous hedge maze. So that's an overview on the storyline to the film, The Shining. So Tracy, let's get some of your initial thoughts on the film.
Oh, wow. Well, this is a film that I've seen multiple times, but I really only experienced it for the first time about, I'd say maybe 10 years ago or so. And this one
Mhm.
never disappoints me. I thought it was a really interesting storyline, fascinating characters, and I'm a big fan of Stephen King, but I've actually never read the book The Shining, which is really terrible. So the only experience I
Well,
have is with the Kubrick film.
I haven't either, so don't blame
Oh.
yourself.
Oh, good, I'm glad I'm not the only one. But, I mean, I've read a number of
Yeah.
his other books, so I will put this one on my list. The atmosphere of this movie, it was, like,
Mhm.
creepy, the big hotel in the mountains, the ominous blizzard, just the feeling of being trapped with someone that was, potentially losing their mind. I mean, what can go wrong, right?
Yeah.
So, the performances by both Jack and Shelley, so memorable. So I'll leave it. That's kind
Yeah.
of like my initial impressions of this film.
Like you, I have seen this film several times over the years. I think I probably first watched it, I'm gonna guess back in the 1980s, maybe on HBO or some other cable outlet. I didn't see it in the theater, but I did see it on television. And I've seen it every once in a while, either on TV or on streaming. I did make sure to watch it again just a couple of nights ago because I hadn't seen it in a while, and I wanted to make sure I'd really gone through the entire movie, all the scenes. There are some really memorable scenes along the way. So it's a film I do have a lot of familiarity with. I did some research too about the movie, as I know you've done, and the director Stanley Kubrick, very controversial character, strange character. We could say other things about him too, which we probably will before all's said and done. But as part of the training for his actors, Kubrick made it mandatory that his cast members watch 3 other films, horror films during the shoot. Two of them are among my favorites: Rosemary's Baby, 1968, The Exorcist, 1973, and then the very weird, very strange David Lynch movie, Eraserhead, which I have trouble getting through. It's just so bizarre. But those are the three films that Kubrick made his actors watch. And he basically wanted to put his cast in the proper mood, having watched all three of those movies. Whether that was really necessary or whether it helped the actors, I really don't have any idea, but it was part of what Kubrick wanted done. He felt that was necessary training. Well, one of the things he should have done, if he didn't, he should have told his actors that we're going to be on the set for a long time, because this movie took nearly a year to film. This wasn't done in 10 days. It wasn't done in 4 or 5 weeks. This was nearly a 12-month process. As a lot of people know, director Kubrick demanded take after take after take for just about every scene. And to be quite honest, based on what a lot of the actors have said, it seemed like a lot of this was unnecessary. They had gotten the scene right in early takes, and yet Kubrick wanted more and more and more. And I've heard some people say that for some reason he tended to go with takes that were done later on, even if they weren't necessarily the best takes. So it was kind of a strange approach. And it must have really taken a lot of wear and tear on these actors to get through this. Also, the script went through a seemingly endless series of changes that occurred on a daily basis. Now, one of our recent guests, Kyle Carvin, who, of course, has Salem House Productions and did the film Popeye the Slayer Man, he said, yeah, it's pretty common to have rewrites of the script during the filming process, during the shoot. But in this case, with The Shining, I mean, it sounds like this was extreme, constant rewrites, almost on a daily basis. So this was not the normal process for making a movie. And all of this contributes to making The Shining an extremely difficult shoot. Now, Kubrick was especially unkind toward Shelley Duvall, who does a great job playing Wendy Torrance, the wife of Jack. Kubrick apparently verbally abused Duvall, putting her under remarkable strain. The treatment was so bad that Shelley Duvall suffered from nervous exhaustion and actually lost some of her hair during the filming. I mean, that's how bad it got. Somehow Duvall made it through all this and delivered a memorable performance as Wendy, who's a kind but ultimately very courageous character. I think that she did fantastically well. I don't know that her performance was necessarily improved by Kubrick's treatment. Without being there, it's hard to know.
Mhm.
But she came through. Bottom line, she delivers a very good effort as, you know, this antithesis to the Jack Torrance character. And Jack, by the end of the film's obviously pretty evil, pretty mad. Wendy is the beacon of reason and common sense, and ultimately, you know, has morality, and she's trying to save herself and her son from what's going on. Now, it wasn't just Kubrick annoying Shelley Duvall. He also annoyed veteran character actor Scatman Crothers, who is also very good in this film. He plays a lesser character, but an important character, and that's Mr. Halloran, the chef, who has the ability to shine, ultimately tries to come to the rescue of Danny Torrance. And Kubrick did this with Crothers too, where he demanded a ridiculous number of retakes for his scenes. And Crothers only appears in a few scenes, 2 or 3, I believe, but apparently, you know, this wore on him too. And he was used to working with Kubrick. Apparently they were friends. They had worked together before, but even Scatman Crothers had pretty much had it with Kubrick by the end of this movie. So I'm curious, Tracy, knowing what we know about what Kubrick put his performers through, especially Duvall and Crothers, knowing all about his craziness and really what seem to be mean-spirited ways. Does this color or affect your enjoyment of the film in any way? It actually does for me. I'm curious if it has that same effect for you.
So that's a really super tough question. I mean, it's really, really hard to read the stuff that, Kubrick put the actors through while filming this movie. I mean, he gave the actors such a difficult time, but he went overboard with Shelley Duvall. Personally, I don't know if it was just like a personal attack or what it was, but the things that I've read, the things that I've seen are horrendous. Um, Maybe he believed that was the best way to get a performance out of her, just to get what he was looking for, but it's really heartbreaking to know the
Yeah.
story behind this movie, but it just gives her performance a whole new layer of intensity, really. Um, I can guarantee there would be
Yeah.
no way that type of behavior would be accepted in the film industry today. Like, that wouldn't be tolerated at all. Um, but does it affect my enjoyment of the film? Um, I'm gonna say probably not really. I really appreciate the movie for what it is. I appreciate the time period that the movie was filmed in. So, like, I'd say, like, probably what, 79, early 80. Um, and, what the movie
Yeah.
is today, it's like a classic piece of horror history. So, it's a lot. I wanna say with the older movies, you kinda have to put your head back in that time period as to what it was like,
Mhm.
the stories, how actors would have been treated. I mean, even if you go back, like, even back to the Boris Karloff days, like, and even earlier, like, sometimes those actors weren't treated very well either. I mean, they were put through a
Right.
torturous amount of things, so I appreciate those movies as well, and they're definitely a part of horror history and just, like, cinematic history, so I I love this movie, and just knowing what
Mhm.
Kubrick put the actors through, it's heartbreaking, but it doesn't really affect how I perceive this movie.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. Absolutely fair. I think the way I look at it is this, there are some actors that I don't like based on stories that I've read, research I've done about, what's gone on in their personal lives. And while I try to put that out of my mind when I'm watching them on screen, because I know they're two separate things, it's sometimes hard to completely blot that out.
Mhm,
So I kind of have the similar feeling with the director. When I first saw the movie, I had no idea that Kubrick had done any of this. This has all kind of come out over time, and it's all pretty common knowledge now.
mhm,
But now that I know that, I kind of have the same attitude toward the film, even though I can't see the director on screen. He's obviously behind the scenes. Knowing what Kubrick did, I guess it does color my enjoyment. I still think it's a very good movie, and I still
mhm,
give it a very high rating, but it does affect it a little bit. If I know the director, like, we know Harrison Smith. He's a friend of
mhm,
ours. He's been on the show a couple of times. So when I watch one of his movies, I'm kind of rooting for him, and I maybe try harder to understand some of the decisions that he's made in a film. Maybe I'll give him the benefit of the doubt a little bit more. I mean, we're
mm,
human. We can't be totally objective. We do have some subjective feelings. I know I do. Um, and then when you have somebody like a Kubrick, who's really at the other end of the spectrum, and even though he's considered a great filmmaker, the process that he went through, often so disgusting, it's got to have an effect on the way I think. So that's
mhm,
kind of where I'm coming from here. Now, having learned about what Shelley Duvall went through and then seeing her performance on screen, I'm all the more impressed by what she did, and I'm guessing you are
yeah,
too.
absolutely, absolutely, and I mean, she was a phenomenal actress. anyway, but this performance just it was mind-blowing. I think she did so well. And I mean, when I watched it for the first time, of course, I had no idea what she had gone through just to make this film. So again, knowing that, it just her performance was just it was a masterpiece. I don't know if she actually won any awards for this, do you know?
I'm not sure that she did, but she probably should have. I mean, she's
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's the perfect counterbalance to Nicholson's character, who's losing his mind and getting meaner and nastier as the movie goes along. And she is trying to hold it together and doing her best to survive and trying to help him in some way until it reaches a point where he can't be helped. And it's just her and Danny trying to escape. They try to climb out the window, which, and the whole outside of the hotel is just covered in this ledge of snow. Danny, who's smaller, is able to get out and slide down this cliff of snow. But Wendy, even though Shelley Duvall is pretty skinny in the film, she's not able to get out. She's stuck, and she has to go back into the apartment and has to deal with Jack face to face. But she does phenomenally well. She is the voice of reason. She is the morally grounded character, sympathetic in every way, maybe too sympathetic. I go back to that early scene when she's talking about what her son's going through, and she's talking with, I think it's his is it his psychiatrist, or I'm not sure if it's his medical doctor, and she's talking about how he got injured and that his father came home, he was a bit drunk, and even then she's trying to be sympathetic, even though obviously this is fatherly abuse. He did
Mhm.
abuse the boy, but she's still trying to give him the benefit of the doubt and saying that, well, he was drunk, he didn't really mean it, it was accidental. So I mean, she's not that she's enabling him, but she's trying to rescue the marriage, basically. She's doing
Mhm.
whatever she can to keep the marriage going, and I think that's an admirable trait, at least up to a point.
Mhm.
So, I think all of this contributes to just an amazing, performance by Shelley Duvall. Now, Jack Nicholson, on the other side of the spectrum, is great. Nicholson has always been known for being a little bit offbeat in his personal life, for having a temper. There was that one time where he, I think, was involved in road rage and he went after another car with a golf club. Something like that happened.
Mhm.
You know, this is the kind of role that is made for him. He's good at playing characters that maybe start off not too bad or start off okay, but then go off the rail. And yet he can make it believable. He's able to handle it. He doesn't go too over the top. And when he's trying to break through the apartment and he comes up with that line, "Here's Johnny." A lot of guys couldn't pull that off. He pulls it off beautifully. And I don't know
Yeah.
if that was scripted or if he ad-libbed it. I'm not exactly sure what happened. I don't know how many takes he ended up doing, but the take they used, it works. And so Nicholson is also phenomenal in his performance. So he deserves some credit too, even though
Yes.
he apparently had a much better working relationship with Kubrick. As I've said, Scatman Crothers is excellent, even though it's a smaller role. We only see him in a few scenes, but he's very good as this friendly chef who takes a liking to this young boy. He's able to connect with him. He knows the boy's nickname is Doc, even though nobody has told him that. So all these characters, they're all played exceptionally well. Now, does Kubrick deserve any credit for that? Was he able to extract that? Or were these just very talented veteran actors? I tend to go more with the latter because these were all accomplished actors. Duvall, Crothers, Nicholson, they had all been pretty established by this point. Duvall may be a little bit younger, but she was already accomplished. And I want to give them more credit than I want to give Kubrick any credit in looking back at what they did. Now, despite all these difficulties, Despite, it takes nearly a full year, they somehow get the film done. And it's interesting because when the movie came out, even though we look at it as a classic now, it wasn't treated that way. There were initially some very poor reviews. There were a lot of people that did not like this movie. Maybe it was too long, maybe it was too dark, maybe it was too ahead of its time. But over time, in the 45 years since then, this is a film that really has become a favorite for many horror fans and also the media as well. But even with that change, it's still one of those movies that people seem to either love or hate it. There doesn't seem to be too many in between. I would say the majority of horror fans tend to be to the favorable side. But I've also heard from horror fans who really despise the movie. They don't like it at all. Why is that? Well, for some, it is too long. It's 2 hours and 26 minutes. And that's a lot of time to commit to a film. It is pretty slow at the beginning. They go through the interview process. They go through the touring process where the general manager has to show Jack and his family the kitchen and all the different parts of this vast hotel, which seemingly goes on for miles. So it is slow paced at the beginning, and it can be a little bit tedious. And because it is such a dark film, 2.5 hours of darkness is a lot. But then you do have those other fans who are willing to overlook these shortcomings, if they are indeed shortcomings, and they're able to say, yeah, this is a legitimate cult classic, and it's a film that deserves to be treasured. Now, I guess, Tracy, I'm one of those who kind of falls in the middle ground. I don't think it's an all-time great. I like The Shining. I think it's very, very good. It's very creepy. It's frightening. It has interesting camera work, tremendously good special effects, especially for the early 1980s. It also, I think, is an important movie because it offers a lot of commentary on issues that, go beyond just entertainment. It has commentary on alcoholism, isolation, what that can do to people, claustrophobia. I can get claustrophobic. It goes into the issue of spousal abuse, abuse of children. So there's a lot of things going on here. And I guess a lot of things that Kubrick was trying to say, and that should make it appreciated. And I do appreciate it. But I'll stop short of saying that, this is among my top 10 or top 20 all-time favorites. I wouldn't quite go that far. I'm curious what your take on the film. I know you like the film.
Mhm.
Do you like it more than I do? Or do you like it maybe at the same level that I do?
I think I like it just a little bit more than you do. I think this movie is iconic.
Okay.
And, like you mentioned, horror fans, they either love it or they hate it. I don't really know too many people kind of like at that in between that it was all right. Um, Even knowing that this movie is like 2.5 hours long, which is really long, um, that's not a hindrance for me. And usually that length of movie that would be a big thumbs down just because I don't have the patience to sit through it. But,
Yeah.
this was a slow burn. It was good psychological, great elements like that. Like you mentioned, the social commentary is really worth recognizing, the trauma, mental health, addiction. Um, those aspects, I think, make it a little more relatable to viewers today, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and really knowing that if you think about it, if you like take out the supernatural aspect, if there is one, I don't know. Um, it's really not that far fetched of a story, really. Like that
Yeah.
could happen. Um, I actually gave this movie 4 stars, so I
Okay.
consider it one of my top 10. Um, I do really like this one, which says a lot. I don't really rate too many 4 stars.
All right. So No, you're a pretty tough grader.
Yeah.
So you give it 4 stars on a scale of 1 to 5, and that really puts
Mm,
it in the category of a classic. I'm gonna give you my final assessment of the film in a moment, but I did wanna talk about a favorite scene. Maybe you have a
mhm,
favorite scene. I think a scene that's really interesting is when Jack Torrance is communicating with one of the ghosts, and it's actually the ghost of Mr. Grady. The guy had lost his
mm,
mind about a decade earlier in 1970, killed his family, killed himself. At first, Jack doesn't realize who he's talking to, and then he realizes he's talking to this murderous caretaker, and he kinda confronts him about it. And then the caretaker kind of turns it back on Jack and says, "Well, you've always been the caretaker, Mr. Torrance, not me." I thought that scene was incredibly creepy and incredibly well done. That might have been the best scene in the film for me. Want to get your thoughts on that and any scene that you thought was really interesting.
oh my gosh. I thought that there were just so many great scenes. It's really hard to pick one. Just different different pieces. Like, I thought it was super creepy. That lady in the bathtub in room
Mm,
237, like, that
yeah.
just overwhelmingly super creepy. The twins, just every time, like, I get shivers just thinking about those 2 twin girls. Um, it didn't matter. I can see them, I can hear them, I can feel them. It's like, oh, and then you have Jack Torrance just pounding away at the door, trying to get through that door to Shelley Duvall. Like, that image will never come out of my brain. Like, there's just so much. And the maze itself too, outside in the snow, like,
Oh, yeah.
again, phenomenal. Like, there's so much to this movie. Um, yeah, I think it was just really well done.
Have you ever gotten caught in a maze like that?
No, thank God.
No.
Have you?
I've been in smaller hedge mazes that weren't that hard to get out of. But I could imagine being in one like that, which was pretty large, complicated, and then on top of that, it's freezing cold, and he's carrying the axe, and as he's searching for Danny, pursuing him, the cold, I think, is starting to take, control of him. He's not
Mhm,
able to articulate his words anymore, and then ultimately, it seems like he's having a heart attack, and then, of course, they show him at the very end where his figure is just frozen stiff, and he's died from, frostbite, frozen to death, literally.
mm,
Um, that's that's really that's a really powerful, scene.
yeah,
I think another interesting scene is toward the end of the movie when Wendy is trying to get away from Jack, and she goes back into the lobby of the hotel, and she starts seeing all the skeleton-like and ghost-like figures.
mhm,
And really, for the first time, she's starting to have supernatural visions the way that Jack and Danny are. I thought that
yes.
was pretty cool too.
Oh,
Yeah. I
absolutely.
really like that.
Yeah, I mean, because you couldn't, like, I mean, throughout the movie, you couldn't really tell, like, was what Jack was experiencing, was it real? Like, or was it just, like, his own psychosis? Like, you just didn't know, so it just kind of validated at the very end that there was something supernatural really about this hotel, the Overlook. Just super
Yeah.
creepy. Yeah.
I think if only Jack had been experiencing these visions, you could say it's him. It's not supernatural. But
Mhm.
because Danny is also having visions, he's seeing the twin girls when he's, riding his little tricycle through the endless hallways. And even that rug pattern is bizarre too. That
Yeah.
just adds to it. And then Wendy at the end of the film, she is seeing supernatural imagery. So
Mm,
to me, it's gotta be supernatural. It has to
yeah.
be. It's not just Jack's imagination, mental illness. I mean, part of it, he is mentally ill, but it
Mhm.
goes beyond that as well. All right, so Tracy, you give it 4 stars. You say this is what, one of your top 10 of all time?
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right, that's certainly fair. I think there's a lot of people who would agree with you. As I've said, it's not one of my all-time favorites, in part because it is so depressing. It has such a downbeat feel to it that it's hard to sustain it for 2.5 hours. But certainly, it is an excellent movie. It is well shot. It is done creatively. It is well acted. It has a lot of ingredients that great horror movies should have. It certainly is a cult classic. There's no question about that. I'll give it a slightly less rating, but still an outstanding rating of 3.5 stars. And just for people that haven't tuned into the show before, we do a 1 to 5 scale. So 1 star means it's pitifully poor. 2, it's well below average. 3 means it's very good. 3.5 stars, excellent. 4 stars or above, classic. So 3.5 stars is still a very, very good rating, and you go a little bit higher at 4 stars. So that's The Shining, which came out 45 years ago, May of 1980. Hard to believe it's been that long. We will take a short break on the show, and when we come back, Tracy and I will talk about the sequel to The Shining, an outstanding film that came out in 2019. And that is a film that we both enjoyed greatly. It's called Dr. Sleep. We'll talk about that when we come back right here on the Ghostly Gallery. Welcome back to the Ghostly Gallery podcast. We continue our look at the franchise that began with The Shining, the book written by Stephen King in 1977. During the first half of the program, we, of course, talked about the film that came out in 1980, a film that's now regarded by many as an absolute classic of horror. And now we'll talk about the newer film, which came out just 6 years ago, and that is called Dr. Sleep. Tracy, if you would, take us through the storyline, give us an idea of exactly what happens in this film.
Okay. So, as you mentioned, Dr. Sleep is a 2019 supernatural horror film. It was written and directed by Mike Flanagan. The film is based on Stephen King's 2013 novel and serves both as a sequel to King's The Shining and a follow up to Stanley Kubrick's 1980 film adaptation. So, this movie picks up again in 1980 with a little girl that is wandering into the woods and comes across a mysterious woman singing. Soon enough, this little girl meets Rose the Hat and her fellow spooky friends. And unfortunately, it doesn't really end well for that little girl. But in the next scene, it flashes to a young Danny Torrance and his mom, Wendy, as they try to kind of put their lives back together after the traumatic events that happened at the Overlook. Danny continues to be haunted by the Overlook's ghosts, particularly that woman in room 237. um, the spirit of Dick Halloran, he visits Danny and he teaches him a really unique technique to trap those spirits into like imaginary lock boxes within his own mind. And that's trying to help him manage his psychic abilities, which we all know is called the shine. So fast forward to 2011, and Danny is all grown up now. So we catch up with Dan Torrance, who is played by Ewan McGregor. So, decades after his terrifying experience at the Overlook, he is now a man battling alcoholism himself, and he's trying to manage the burden of having these psychic abilities. He's trying to turn his life around. He relocates to a different town, and there he meets his good friend Billy. He joins AA. He gets a job at a hospice, and he's really now on the path to recovery. And then next up, we get a really good look at Rose the Hat again and her friend Crow Daddy. And they observed this young woman who possesses the uncanny ability to control people with her mind. They lure this young woman, and her name happens to be Snake Bite Andy, into the fold through this really graphic ritual that makes her become one of what they call the True Knot cult members. Um, and their motto is springtime forever, eat well, stay young, and live long. And I feel they're kind of like energy vampires, I guess. Their power comes from the essence of dying people,
Mhm.
and they eat what is referred to as steam. So as you see, like most of these people happen to be young children that possess the gift of the shine. And you actually see them eating this steam. So then you just kind of like
Yeah.
skip ahead a little bit, and we now meet this really, really young girl named Abra. We quickly find out that this little girl, she's also different and possesses the shine. Abra connects to Dan, and she learns to communicate with him and establishes this bond. She always thought that Dan was kind of like her imaginary friend, just like Tony was Danny's imaginary friend when he was a boy. So at this point, we're about 40 minutes into the movie already, and we've been introduced to pretty much all the main players. And I think it's pretty good up to this point. And I'm curious what you think, Bruce. Have you seen this before?
I have, Tracy. I watched it in 2020, and I
Mm,
remember specifically it was Easter Sunday. It was during the pandemic. We were just starting to sort of get locked down as a society, and we were looking for things to do, and we decided to, I think, rent the film, watched it on our TV. So this was early 2020, about March or no, well, it would have been March or April, whenever Easter was that year. And it was
mm,
only a few months after the film came out, which was late in 2019. And then I watched it again earlier this year because I wanted to refresh myself on the film. I've seen it twice now. I really like the way the film begins. The very beginning, the same haunting music that we hear is pretty much the same music at the beginning of The Shining.
mhm,
So I kind of like that. That was an ode to The Shining. I thought that was very effective. And I like the early flashback to 1980. And I love the fact that director Mike Flanagan was able to really recreate the look of that time as it was shown in the movie. Also, at the same time, Flanagan gives us actors who are very reminiscent of Shelley Duvall and Scatman Crothers. Young actress Alex Esso plays Wendy, the Shelley Duvall character. And Alex Esso has a look and manner very much reminding us of Duvall playing Wendy Torrance. There are some times when she's calling out to Danny, she sounds exactly like Shelley Duvall, really
yeah,
effective. And then there's another actor, Carl Lumbly. He does the same in his ability to sort of recreate Crothers in the Dick Halloran role. I
mhm,
shouldn't say recreate because you have to make it your own, but he has a similar manner of speaking. And he has, those same kind of qualities of wisdom, the way that he talks to Danny.
mhm,
And, that's not easy to pull off, that kind of replication. But these actors, under the direction of Flanagan, they're able to do just that. And I thought that was extremely effective. And I thought that was a really key part of the film. Now, over the first half hour to 40 minutes of the movie, there's a lot to keep track of. The first time I watched it, I found it a little bit confusing because we have on one hand this crazy Rose the Hat, who's up to no good. We have the updated situation of Danny Torrance because we flash forwarded to the modern day 2011. And then we have this introduction of a girl that you mentioned, Abra, She kind of comes out of nowhere. She's got these vast powers that really grab your attention. So, first time I'm watching the movie, it's a little confusing to take it all in. But once you get a hold of what's going on with these three important characters, you really start to appreciate the dramatic story that's unfolding before you. And also this impending battle between Rose the Hat's True Knot cult and the very good, very moral Danny Torrance. You just know that they're going to come to a showdown. And as that
Mhm.
anticipation starts to build, that really adds to the entertainment value, really enhanced it for me. And you look at these characters, I mean, you just love to hate Rose. You just know she is terrible. And at the same time, I really like Danny and the effort he is putting into turning his life around. He's been an alcoholic, he's struggled with jobs, and he's come to a turning point. He's decided, I've got to get things going in the right direction, and you appreciate the fact that he's doing that. So those are some of my initial thoughts, really about the first 30 to 40 minutes, maybe 45 minutes of the film.
Mhm.
So it's got me hooked pretty much right away, Tracy.
Oh my gosh, you're right, like, there is so much that, is kind of, like, crammed into that first 40, 45 minutes, and it's just for me too, it was a little bit kind of overwhelming to try to, like, pick all those pieces up and just kind of, like, sort them out as to where this
Yeah,
was going, but it definitely worth the wait, for sure.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, the characters were amazing. And, if we jump ahead to 8 years into the future, we now see Dan. He's very well established. He's, doing great in his community. He has this wonderful job at this hospice. He takes care of older people who are ready to cross over when their time comes, and they call him Doctor Sleep. That's where the name comes from. They call him Doctor Sleep because he's calming, he's
yeah,
reassuring. He uses his gift to help guide these people through their change. And then we come back to Rose the Hat and all of her True Knot members. And I think she is really amazing. Like, her character and just the actress that portrays this character, really, really well done. Um, so Rose acknowledges that their stash of steam, it's starting to run low, and this is where they need to replenish. They need to track down somebody who has this gift, so the shine. They find a candidate. It's a young boy who just happens to be a baseball player. He has the essence that these energy vampires need. They abduct him, and through an extremely graphic scene, they collect his steam. Now, the scene is not long. It's maybe 5 to 10 minutes long, if it's that long, but when I was watching it, I found it extremely violent and very traumatic. And from what I've
hmm,
read, the film crew actually had a really hard time shooting that scene. They were emotional, they cried. In between takes, they tried to lighten things up with the child actor who played the boy, and they could only film it in, like, short bursts just to
hmm,
minimize the effect on that little actor, which, I mean, I can't imagine what it would've been like for him to play that because as a viewer,
yeah,
that that was extreme. I found that very extreme. But the scene was necessary. It was really pivotal for the film, and,
yeah,
like, from far across the other side of the country, the young girl, who's not really a young girl, she's now a teenager, Abra witnesses the brutal murder of this boy at the hands of the True Knot because Abra can connect to Rose the Hat, and she viewed what happened to the boy, like, she viewed it kind of, like, from behind Rose, so she could see it,
Yeah.
And Abra's psychic powers, they're a lot stronger than Dan's, but she reaches out to her friend for help. And then Abra takes it upon herself to find Dan and goes to meet him in person, which is huge. And that really kicks off the story from there. So that's kind of like we're all stopped for now. I found the performances were like super amazing, and you talked about some of them as well. Did you have a favorite performance?
Well, let's start with the two leads,
Mm,
Ewan McGregor and Rebecca Ferguson. They're both great in their
mhm,
roles. Let's start with McGregor. I think he's really the key to the movie. A horror movie, in my mind, needs to have a likable protagonist because then it makes the horror all the more difficult to accept. You want to have somebody to root for, not just somebody to root against. And McGregor pulls that off here beautifully. And you can see how determined he is not to repeat the mistakes that his father Jack made, and we saw that all too well during The Shining. Now he has fallen into some of the traps that his father did. He has become an alcoholic. He has become somewhat unstable in his life, but he's able to correct it while he's still
mhm,
relatively young, and he's able to make a good change for the positive. And as you said, he's able to use his shining ability to help people who are in hospice, they're on the verge of dying. He's really helping them prepare, get through those very difficult moments. Now, it's interesting with McGregor, he's not somebody that we really think of as a horror actor. He has appeared in a few such films. He's been in Shallow Grave. He was in a movie called Spooks and Creeps. He also did a film called Night Watch. But clearly, Dr. Sleep is the best of all
mhm.
of these. And I know McGregor has said that he doesn't really like horror movies, which is maybe why he hasn't made more. But he's so good in this role that I wish he would do more horror films. And he
Mm,
showed that he can certainly handle the role of the protagonist, the hero. Then you have Rebecca Ferguson as Rose the Hat, and she's a very interesting villain. She's physically attractive, charming at first when she meets somebody, like she always says, "Oh, hi there. How you doing?" It's like she's flirting with people. And then eventually she reveals her completely sinister side. I mean, when her cult kidnaps and kills that young boy who is a budding baseball star, that just confirms how completely evil she and the rest of the True Knot cult are. I mean, you can't just screw around with a great young baseball player, Tracy. You know how much I love baseball, right? That's my other great love besides
exactly.
horror. If you're going to mess around with baseball, man, you're not going to get away with that in my mind. So, yeah, I'm kidding a little bit here. I mean, it is a
No,
very
you're not.
difficult scene. Yeah, it's a difficult scene. We see it. I hate it when kids are subject to violence in horror films. I don't really like it, but I see how it's necessary in this movie.
Mhm,
Um, but the fact that it's baseball, that it is a tie to Stephen King, because Stephen King, as we know, is a huge baseball fan. He has written books about baseball, written books about the Boston Red Sox. So he works baseball into the equation here in a very interesting way. And, baseball, I think, some ways represents the good. And obviously, Rose the Hat represents everything that is evil. So the two leads, they really set the tone. They're both outstanding, and that does help to carry much of the film. I do
mhm,
want to mention, though, Tracy, two other actors with smaller roles that are both very good here. And they're two favorites of mine. One is Cliff Curtis, who plays Danny's friend, Billy Freeman, who meets him when he first comes to town, sets him up with an apartment, sets him up with a job, gets him to go to the AA meetings. Cliff Curtis is one of those chameleon-like actors who can do any role, good, bad, villain, in between, whatever. He is believable, and he's believable as a good guy here as Billy. So he does a nice job. And then also we should mention Jocelyn Donahue, who plays Abra's mother. Jocelyn Donahue starred in a really good movie in the 2010s, I believe, called House of the Devil. It's a great movie about satanic worship. She plays the lead in that. She's obviously a few years older here, but I thought it
Mhm.
was good to see her in another film, and I think she's a very capable actress, and I don't think she's really gotten the parts that she deserves, but she does a good job with a smaller role given here. So those are some of the
Mhm.
people that stood out. There's really no weak link among the actors, but the two main players and then these two smaller characters, for me, they really kind of stood out.
Yeah. No, awesome. And, I was surprised with Flanagan's choice for Ewan McGregor. I never would have thought that he would have been selected for this role just because I'm so used to seeing him in different projects, even like the Star Wars projects and stuff like that. But I was just surprised, but he did excellent. And, throughout this movie, so if you're a Mike Flanagan fan, you're going to recognize a lot of these cast members. Um, he tends to use the same people like through project after project, which is great. Um, the little girl Violet at the very beginning of this film, she actually played in The Haunting of Hill House, and Kylie Curran, who plays Abra, she's actually the young girl in the Fall of the House of Usher, that Netflix series that's I think it came out in 2023, I think 2023. Um, she played a top role in that project. And even Henry Thomas played a small cameo towards the very end as a bartender, and honestly, I had to look a couple of times because I was like, "Oh my gosh, he looks just like Jack Nicholson there," when he was playing the bartender. So I thought that was, like, really kind of cool, but, you're right, there's not a weak link in the cast. Everybody did such a great job. I mean, even kind of like the very, very small roles, the members of the True Knot clan, like, just each and every one, like, even the fellow that played grandpa, and the name escapes me, um, he was pretty cool, creepy cool, but, yeah, I did appreciate everybody, and then, as we kinda, like, progress throughout this story, um, Abra's powers are kind of, like, growing stronger, and she's now a target of the True Knot clan, and reluctantly, Dan Torrance becomes Abra's protector and mentor. And as they grow closer, Dan is forced to confront not only the cult, but his own long buried traumas. So, to stop Rose and the True Knot, Dan actually needs to go back to the place he swore he would never ever return to. And that was the Overlook Hotel, which is abandoned, but it's not dead. It's still alive with evil energy. And, not to give it away, but, the big finale, Dan reawakens the haunted hotel spirits to battle Rose. Um, he does eventually sacrifice himself to destroy not only the Overlook, but he also kind of like frees the ghosts of his past. And the young girl Abra survives, and she carries forward Dan's legacy. And in the very last scene of the movie, there is a touching moment. Dan appears to Abra as a spirit, just like Dick Halloran had once done for Danny, offered his guidance and his peace. And the story, it's not ending in darkness, but it sheds a glimmer of hope for both Abra and keeping the memory of Danny Torrance alive. So again, this is a long movie. It's about 2.5 hours long, but I feel it needs to be that long to tell the story. I love this movie. It's not only a continuation for the film The Shining, but it's actually a really good standalone film too. So if you haven't seen The Shining, you could just start with this one. I appreciated the callbacks to the original movie. The atmosphere was phenomenal. It was psychological, supernatural elements, and Mike Flanagan just pushed this to, the next limit with some of those scenes. Like, I've never seen anything like it. He captured the true essence and the overwhelming dread that the Overlook holds. And with all Mike Flanagan projects, this was really well done. And Bruce, 4.5 stars for Doctor Sleep from me. What do you
I don't
give
think
it?
you've given any film that high a ranking. 4.5. Wow.
4.5, 4.5.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, I love this one too. I think it's compelling. It's got a creative storyline,
Mm,
intriguing characters across the board, both good and evil. The special effects are somewhat limited, but when they're used, they're done very well in a believable way. And I thought it was a nice ending coming back to the place the story originated with, which
mhm.
is, of course, the creepy Overlook Hotel. I thought that was really a good way to kind of create the circle or finish the circle here. The only criticism I have is that, again, at 2.5 hours,
Mm,
it's a little bit on the long side, but this film is not as dark throughout as The Shining was. So I found the length a little more tolerable. And bottom line is, if the movie's good, you're not really that upset about devoting a little bit more time to it. And this movie is so good, so great, that 2.5 hours, it goes by pretty easily. It doesn't drag really at any point. I think that this is really one of the best horror films of the 21st century. I would not hesitate to call it a modern day classic. I go 4 stars for Dr. Sleep. So we both really love
wow.
this film. Absolutely outstanding. I know, Tracy, you have some final thoughts on some other projects Mike Flanagan is working on. This might be his best movie. He's, of course, done all those great Netflix series,
Mhm.
but you've got some news on some other projects, some other things to look forward to from a guy that I think is becoming one of the more important horror directors of the modern era.
Oh, yeah. I It's no surprise, like, I'm a big Mike Flanagan fanatic, I guess. He's done so many great projects, and, Midnight Mass is, like, one of my favorite series that he's done, but there are some new projects that are coming up from him. He has just kind of wrapped up The Life of Chuck with Tom Hiddleston and Mark Hamill, and that's due to come out this year, and from everything I've read, it looks like it's probably actually coming out in June. So, I'm not 100% sure if it's gonna be an Amazon Prime project or if it's actually gonna be a theatrical release. I've kinda read both pieces, but
Mhm.
more often than not, it sounds like it might actually hit the theaters, which I think would be great if it does. And again, that's based on a Stephen King novella. And then in March of 2026, we have the new Exorcist sequel that's due to come out, and it is in pre-production. And he is also set to develop a new adaptation of Stephen King's Carrie,
Mm.
and he may potentially have involvement with a new TV series adaptation of Stephen King's The Dark Tower series. So there's lots there. Um, and it seems to be coming out fast and furious. So, I mean, Stephen King has a lot of great pieces of work out there. Um, the original film Carrie, I really love that film. There was an adaptation, I wanna say maybe in 2016, Bruce, with Chloe Moretz Grace, I believe is her name, played the role of Carrie, and I think that was back in 2016. Now, I haven't seen that version, but I honestly would be very curious to see what, Mike Flanagan will come up with. So, yeah, that's kind of like what he's got going on.
Yeah, he's a prolific guy. He's done some really good stuff. He has shown a willingness to take existing projects, vintage projects, but put his own spin on them. And for the most part, I
Mm,
think he's done a really good job. I think the challenge with The Exorcist is going to be very interesting. The last Exorcist film did not do well. It was not critically well received. In fact, it got such bad reviews. I still haven't watched it. I should watch it at some point. that's one of those franchises. I wonder maybe it's just run its course. But if he can breathe life into that franchise, that's going to really show some special ability on the part of Mike Flanagan. All right, so that's going to do it for this week's episode. Again, the two films that we looked at, The Shining, which came out 45 years ago, I gave it 3.5 stars. Tracy went a little bit better at 4 stars, calling it one of her 10 favorite of all time. And Dr. Sleep, the 2019 movie, which we both absolutely love. I go 4 stars on that one. Tracy a bit higher at 4.5 stars. So that's it for this week's edition of the gallery. Tracy, want to thank you as always. Good stuff talking about two really interesting films, The Shining and Dr. Sleep.
Oh, it's been a blast. Two of my favorites. So I'm definitely happy to talk about these ones. So thank you.
My thanks to co-host Tracy Asteria. Of course, our thanks to all of you listening, watching our episodes. We thank you for joining us in this Museum of the Macabre, and we do hope that we'll see you again next time right here in the Ghostly Gallery.